July 5th, 2025, Birmingham, England, Villa Park Stadium. A 76-year-old man takes the stage. His hands are shaking. His legs can barely carry him. Parkinson's disease has been slowly destroying his nervous system for over 20 years. The doctors told him not to do it. His wife told him not to do it. His children told him not to do it. Everyone around Ozzy Osbourne said the same thing. Don't go out there. He took the stage anyway. Ozzy, who first took the stage with Black Sabbath, went on to make music with the band he later formed under his own name. That night, they were saying goodbye to their audience. 17 days after that concert, Ozzy Osbourne had died. But here's the thing. Is this the story? It doesn't start with the ending. It begins long before anyone knew his name. It begins in a place where most people wouldn't survive. I'm going to take you through this story from beginning to end, because Ozzy's life isn't just a rock and roll story. It's one of the wildest, most heartbreaking, funniest, and scariest adventures anyone has ever lived. And I've spent the last 3 weeks buried in books, interviews, court records, and old footage to piece all of this together for you. Let's get started. Ozzy, whose real name is John Michael Osbourne, was born on December 3rd, 1948, in the Aston neighborhood of Birmingham. If you're not familiar with Aston, picture the area. Post-war England, row houses crammed together, factories belching smoke around the clock, and families of 8 squeezed into 2-bedroom apartments. That was Ozzy's life. Ozzy lived with 6 children, 2 parents, and a single bathroom. His father worked the night shift at an auto parts factory. His mother worked the day shift. They hardly ever saw each other, and the family was constantly short on money. Now, here's something most people don't know. Ozzy has dyslexia, and it's severe. School was a nightmare for him. Back then, teachers didn't understand dyslexia. They just thought he was stupid. The other kids bullied him. He was constantly getting beaten up. He's talked about this in interviews, and to be honest, the way he describes it, the situation really does sound brutal. He said he felt invisible, as if no one expected anything from him, ever. I get it. Even though I wasn't at his level, I grew up in a similar neighborhood. I know what it feels like when the neighborhood determines your fate before you even have a chance. For Ozzy, the message was unmistakable. You will work in a factory and socialize at a bar. This lifestyle is an unending cycle, leading to a definitive conclusion. But Ozzy heard the Beatles on the radio. She loves you. And something clicked. In his autobiography, he said, and I really love this line, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, but I knew it had something to do with that sound. What was the problem? He had no money, he had no instrument, he had no connections. So what did he do? He did what a desperate young man from Aston would do. He tried to rob a clothing store. He got caught. He spent 6 weeks in Winson Green prison. He was 17 years old. This man, who would become one of history's most famous rock stars and later be known as the Prince of Darkness, was sitting in a prison cell at the age of 17 because he couldn't afford a microphone.
Are you ready for the darkness? Welcome to
When Ozzy was released, he posted a flyer in the window of a record store. It was very simple. Ozzy Zig needs a gig. And that flyer, that single piece of paper, brought him together with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. On paper, these 4 men had nothing. They came from working-class backgrounds. They had no formal music training. They had no money, but they had something else. They had a sound that no one else in the world was making, a sound that was both incredibly striking and terrifying for that era. The spirit of peace and love captivated everyone in 1968. The Beatles, the Stones, the Flower Power movement, the energy of Woodstock. But what about these 4 young men from Birmingham? They grew up next to factories. They heard the roar of the machines. They heard metal clanging against metal, and that's precisely what they brought to their music. I remember the first time I heard Black Sabbath's self-titled song. I was 19. My college roommate, a devoted metal enthusiast, the type who adorned his walls from floor to ceiling with posters, played this song at approximately 2 a.m. Those first 3 notes, that tritone. The Devil's Interval. It literally gave me goosebumps. Back then, I wasn't even interested in metal music, but that sound affected me. Critics tore their first album to shreds. One review literally called it a disastrous trip from which you can't wake up. But what about the young people, the fans? They went absolutely wild for this album. The debut album climbed to number 8 in the UK charts, without any radio support. There wasn't a single positive press review. The band's fame grew solely through word of mouth. Between 1970 and 1975, Black Sabbath released 6 albums. They released 6 albums in 5 years, and each one sold exceptionally well. They invented heavy metal, not as a marketing term, but as a real, tangible musical experience that didn't exist before them. By the way, this isn't just my opinion. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recognizes them, quite literally, as the genre's founders. As with any band, fame brought its own set of problems. Everything that made Ozzy magical on stage, chaos, unpredictability, raw energy, was slowly turning into a problem off stage.
Fired. I did not see that coming.
By 1977, Ozzy had plunged into the depths of his own darkness. And when I refer to deep, I mean the kind of depth where one is unaware of how far one has descended. He was quite candid about his struggles in interviews over the years. In his own words, "I was a walking pharmacy. That says everything you need to know without me having to go into detail." The rest of the band wasn't exactly living a clean life either, but Ozzy was on a whole different level. He wouldn't show up to rehearsals, he'd forget the lyrics on stage. He'd get into conflicts with Tony Iommi, and believe me, Tony Iommi is not someone you want to have a problem with. The tension within the band had become unbearable. Now I want you to think about the situation for a second from the band's perspective. You built the band together, from scratch, from a piece of paper in a store window. You sold millions of albums, you toured the world, and your lead singer, the man who, for most fans, is the band itself, is falling apart right before your eyes. You tried talking to him, you tried helping him. Nothing worked. What do? In 1979, they kicked him out of the band. And that's the heartbreaking part. Ozzy said he didn't even protest, he just accepted it. A voice inside him knew that they were right. He knew he couldn't control himself. But knowing something and being able to change it are two entirely unique things. And that chasm between knowing and doing is where so many people get lost. Not just rock stars, people. This part of the story reminds me why I started this channel. Because everyone knows the legend. Ozzy biting a bat on stage, Ozzy from the Osbournes, Ozzy who's become a meme. But almost no one talks about this moment. A 30-year-old man, kicked out of his band with no plan, sitting alone in a hotel room. A man sitting there not knowing what to do. Reportedly, he didn't leave that room for 3 months. 3 months. He just sat there staring at the TV screen, wondering if everything he'd built had come to an end. The man who once stood before thousands of screaming fans couldn't even open a door. Can you imagine being at the top of the world and then having nothing left? Not slowly, not gradually, just nothing. That's where the story could have ended. Many stories like this conclude at that point. But Ozzy had an advantage that many people in his situation didn't have. Sharon Arden. Sharon, who would later become Sharon Osbourne, saw something in Ozzy that even he couldn't see in himself. She became his manager. And not just a manager, she was the architect of everything that would follow. She was the one who got him sober enough to record. She was also the one who found Randy Rhoads. After Sharon, Randy was his second chance. And if you don't know who Randy Rhoads is, let me put it this way. Randy Rhoads is what happens when classical guitar training meets the madness of heavy metal. He was 24 when he joined Ozzy's solo band, and he possessed a talent far ahead of his time. He played guitar like a god. The 2 albums they made together, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, are among the best metal albums ever recorded. Just about everyone interested in electric guitar would agree with this assessment, or at least, I hope so. But here's where life, as always, does its thing. That ruthless, unjust, inexplicable thing. March 19, 1982. The band was on tour. They were in Florida. The tour bus was parked in front of the mansion where they were staying. A man on the tour crew, the tour bus driver, decided to go for a joyride in a small plane. Randy Rhoads and the band's hairdresser boarded the plane with him. As a joke, the driver tried to scare people by flying low over the tour bus. The wings struck the bus. The plane crashed into a nearby house and exploded. Randy Rhoads was 25 years old. When the incident occurred, Ozzy was sleeping on the bus. He was awakened by the sound of the crash. According to everyone who was there, that moment caused something inside him to break that never fully healed. He returned to that dark world once again. This is what people don't understand about Ozzy's dark side. It wasn't just about partying. It wasn't just the rock and roll lifestyle either. It was the story of a man who constantly lost those he loved, was shaken by life's blows, and had no other recourse but to turn to the one thing that was destroying him to cope. But somehow, and I really don't understand how, Ozzy kept going. Throughout the 80s and 90s, he became one of the biggest solo artists in metal. Album after album, tour after tour. Ozzfest became the world's largest traveling metal festival. Sharon built an empire around him. In 2002, the Osbournes, a reality show that aired on MTV, came along. And suddenly, the Prince of Darkness became America's favorite dad. I was just a little kid when that show aired. Actually, I was too young to watch it. But I remember my older cousin showing me videos of him on YouTube later on. This guy was genuinely funny. Not funny in an acting way, just funny. The way he talked, the way he wandered around looking confused, the way he argued with Sharon. It was all real, and that's why America loved him. But there was a dark side to it too. While the world was laughing along with Ozzy on TV, his body was falling apart. In 2003, he was in an ATV accident that could have been fatal. He broke his collarbone, 8 ribs, and a vertebra in his neck. His heart stopped twice in the ambulance. Twice. They had to put him into a medically induced coma. When he woke up, he couldn't walk properly for months. And then he was diagnosed. In 2005, even though he didn't go public with it until 2020, Ozzy was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He was slowly losing control of his body. The tremor that people had been joking about for years was actually a symptom of his condition. It wasn't due to illegal drugs. It was an incurable degenerative neurological disorder. Can you picture that? The whole world thinks you're shaking because you've partied too hard. You know the truth is much worse, and you keep that secret for 15 years. In the 2020s, Ozzy faced challenges on multiple fronts. His Parkinson's disease was progressing. He needed multiple surgeries on his spine due to the 2003 accident. He could barely walk. In 2023, he announced to the public that he was retiring from touring. The man who had spent 55 years on stage said he was no longer physically able to do it. Black Sabbath announced they would hold a one-time reunion concert. All 4 original members would be together at Villa Park in Birmingham, their hometown. They named the concert Back to the Beginning. Perhaps Iommi and the band felt something and organized one last tribute. July 5th, 2025. Now think about this. Ozzy can barely stand. He has Parkinson's. He's 76 years old. His doctors are firmly against it. His family is horrified. But Ozzy Osbourne acts just like he always does. He ignores everyone and takes the stage. From everything I've read and watched, that concert was something else. There were 40,000 people in the stadium. Tony Iommi was playing those riffs one more time. Geezer's bass reverberated through the ground, and Ozzy, shaking, struggling but singing, was right up front, even though he was sitting in his grand chair. Right where he always is, right where he always belongs. I watched a fan-shot video of War Pigs from that night, and I won't lie to you, it really moved me. Not because the performance was perfect, it wasn't, but you could see what it cost him to be there. Every note was a struggle, and he fought for every single one. 17 days later, on July 22nd, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne passed away. He was surrounded by his family. On the death certificate filled out by his daughter Amy, his occupation. His daughter Amy filled out the death certificate listing his occupation as songwriter, artist, and rock legend. rock legend, on his death certificate. This isn't a title someone gave him at an awards ceremony. This is what his daughter wrote to describe what her father did with his life. A child from Aston who couldn't read, who went to prison at 15, who invented heavy metal in a factory town, who was kicked out of his band. He lost his best friend in a plane crash, who struggled with addiction for decades. He was diagnosed with an incurable disease. People repeatedly claimed that his career was over. He took the stage in his hometown one last time, fully aware that music was more important to him than his own safety, even though it could literally kill him. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't perfect. He'd be the first to tell you that. He hurt people. He hurt himself. He made terrible decisions. He was selfish, destructive, and chaotic. But he was also brave. He was relentlessly, stubbornly, and almost foolishly brave. And that's what people connected with. People connected with a man who was knocked down time and time again, yet kept getting back up, over and over again. For 57 years, the show is over, no encore. But what about the music? Music never dies. If this story moved you as much as it moved me, if you felt something while watching it, hit the subscribe button. Rock legends, metal icons, the stories behind the music that changed our lives. Real investigations, real stories, no clickbait. In every video, we'll go to an even darker place. I'm the voice behind No Encore. See you in the next episode.